much, Neil, for the kind introduction. So, yes, my name's Sweta. I'm from the University of Greenwich, and I'm the current editor for the journal, which is sort of the flagship journal, I guess, for Society for Natural Sciences, called New Directions in the Teaching of Natural Sciences. So I wouldn't worry if you're not at an institution that does not have a natural sciences program. That is not, it's not integral for publishing this journal. So what I thought I'd do today is just sort of run through what the journal's about, and then, if you wanted to publish, how would you go about and do that? Okay, so essentially, the journal sort of started as a journal for people teaching and conducting pedagogical research within natural sciences subjects within higher education, different institutions, and basically it's about thinking about what we teach, how we teach it, and how we what sort of methods we use to enable us to become better practitioners, and also disseminating that information to the wider community. The way that's done in this journal, like I guess many others, is through different types of publications. So it might be an opinion piece, it might be a research project that one has carried out as part of their teaching, whether it be in their own institution or as part of a collaboration across many different institutions. And the idea is that we do that across different subjects that are classed as natural sciences subjects. So it's not just necessarily chemistry, biology, physics. It could be psychology, it could be maths, computer studies, etc. So in terms of the type of submissions that we have, I'll just run through these. So we have editorial and opinion pieces on policy issues. Generally, this is something where you'd be invited to submit a piece on. So we don't have many of these. One of the more popular ones is the community direction. So this will be sort of short reports or some work that you might have carried out in developing an area of teaching that you've been working on. It might not be a full research project, but it could be some work that you might have done. Also, short reports on conference presentations are also included in this section. So if you presented some work at a Horizon conference, then you might feel that you want to actually publish that work, and we would publish this under the community directions. You've then got the research directions, which is a bigger research project. So this will be work that's being carried out on a particular research area, a piece of research to do with a particular part of your teaching. You may have lots of data. You've carried out surveys, it might be focus groups, and then you've taken that data and you've sort of disseminated that in terms of what the findings are from that project. So we have quite a lot of those. So in terms of sort of more popular submissions that we get, these are the community directions and then the research directions. We also have one type of submission that's called a pedagogic direction. So again, this is review of topics in different areas of pedagogic research and innovative practice that's been reported before. And then we have book reviews. Again, we don't really get many of those. So this is just the front page of the website. So if you type in just New Direction, the Teaching of Natural Sciences, it will take you to this page. So the website has changed. It changed last year in terms of sort of the interface, the back interface and stuff. And at the moment, what I'm looking to do is actually try and add a bit more information into that for people that are thinking about publishing. So as I said, the first sort of front page, it gives you a list of what the current articles that have been published for that particular issue. So on the right hand side here, we have information which I'll show you in the next slide, in terms of, if you were thinking about, if you wanted to submit some of your work, how you would do that. So one thing I think is important to mention, we know that submitting articles for publication, depending on where you're submitting them, can be expensive. It's really good to note that this is free to read, but also free to publish as well. Okay, so there's no cost attached to this. So if you're thinking about preparing for a submission, there's a couple of things that you might want to do first. So you need to register for an author account. So there is a link on there to set up that account. So that goes to a colleague at Leicester University who essentially does all the work in the background for the website. Obviously, we need to ensure that the submission hasn't been accepted anywhere else. It's not been published, and it's not been considered anywhere else. So I think that's something that's really, really important. In terms of the submission file, this is one of the pieces that I am going to be changing. So I will be asking for the file to be submitted in a particular way. Generally, Word is much better for me, but I will be providing a much more concise template for authors to use. In terms of references, we do ask for the URLs, and going forward, I will be asking for authors to essentially try and do a lot of the formatting themselves as they're going along. I can talk about sort of some of the issues that I find as an editor. In terms of the text, it's sort of spaced, and these are just some of the points in terms of some of the formatting. Again, I do check this before before the article is published anyway, but it's a lot easier for me. Some of that work's been done before it's before I have to go through it. In terms of the word limit, we don't have a rigorous word limit for the papers, but generally most of our articles are anywhere between sort of 2,000 and 4,000 words, depending on what the article is about, what work has been done. I'll be honest, it's not something that I will count. We won't count the number of words. We don't allow supplementary material. That's one thing. But I think if the word count, in terms of what's been submitted is, there's not lots of superfluous information in there. We're generally okay with that. It is something that it is a little bit longer, then I would suggest have a conversation with me first about it, and then we can discuss the best way to move forward. Again, since I've been author, I've never had that issue. As I said, I will be providing a proper template. At the moment, I just ask for it to be as one column in a Word document. It just makes it easier for me to format using Arial. In terms of references, we ask for Harvard style, and also all the DOI should be provided where they are available. Again, this is something that I do check, and I have found sometimes that the DOIs that have been provided are actually not the correct DOIs at all. They're not in the correct format. So, I do ask that can be checked. As I said, the journal is open access, and there are no publication charges for authors. So and it's published under a CC BY license. So in terms of the presentation slides, that's all I really want to go through. I think, as I said, I've kind of talked about some of the issues that I've found when articles have been submitted in terms of formatting. So in terms of not using the correct font. We used to publish the journal using a 2-column format, as you find with some other of the journals. But what we were finding was where colleagues had graphs and tables, and the formatting, it was just an absolute nightmare. So we've moved over just to the one column format, just to make it a little bit easier. Just not using the right font. Sometimes the article's been written in, some weird program, and that's again, we've just had to. Then I've had to sort of copy everything over into a proper Word document. So I think just being aware of those things, I think, is important. So I'm happy to take any questions if anyone's got any.
Thank you, Sweta. Has anyone got any questions? If not, I might start off with one thing I think a lot of people in the network are a bit unsure about is actually, what sort of level of content they would need for a paper, what the editors are looking for. So it might be useful if you've got any experience of things where, you think submissions have been lacking in terms of actual content, whether particularly in the research directions things.
Yeah, so I think that's a really, really good question. So I think in terms of sort of the research direction articles that we've had submitted, some of the time it's in terms of the actual data that's been collected, we found that it's not sufficiently then correlated to what the conclusions and the outcomes were from that project. So lots of assumptions were made. So I think that's really important to note. So yeah, that's sort of one of the key parts that I think is that's the sort of most common thing that we see.
Yeah. So following on from that, and just from my own experience, because obviously two sorts of data that people might be using, well, quantitative data, and a lot of people will use survey data, like responses, the analysis of that, and and people might argue about what statistical analysis is appropriate, whether non-parametric or parametric. I mean, I don't know, have you got any experience in those areas? Because one thing that if I'm reviewing something, I see people averaging Likert scale questions, I go a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't come across. I've not seen many, not in the time, but I've been editor, using lots of statistical data. So when that comes up, then I'll have to start thinking about that.
Okay.
I mean, generally, in terms of when it goes for peer review. So I think that's another point. So the articles, they'll be, once they're submitted, they'll be assigned to a reviewer. So it does go through that peer review process. So we have a number of reviewers that we use in terms of who will go through that review process.
So yeah, Martin did ask about peer review, and I think my experience is there's two reviewers.
In this, I mean, generally for this for our journal, it's generally one reviewer.
Okay.
But if it needs to then go to a second person, then we do that.
Okay. Alex.
Yeah, thanks so much for going through that, Sweta. Yeah, I think it was just feeding on from what Neil just said about because I do a lot of stats and a lot of analysis, and it probably speaks to something more generally as well, that I find a lot of the journals in education are very qualitative and very descriptive. And I think nice to know that your journal, although it might not seem like there's many stats-based things in there, that you do take quantitative stuff, because sometimes it's hard to work out what journals actually take given what they actually publish. And it was just to say, yeah, it's good to know that you do take more quantitative things as well. It's something I kind of struggle with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, what our journal wants to do is support people to publish their work. So it's, you know, everything is reviewed. So it is, you know, the process is rigorous, but we want to give that opportunity. And, you know, we do go back to people and say, right, actually, we could publish this, but before that, you've got to do X, Y, and Z. And you know, we won't say, well, if it is quantitative, then yeah, we're not going to take it. We you know, it's natural sciences, so in terms of the subjects, you know, that we publish, it's quite broad. And I think it's really important that we give our colleagues an opportunity to publish.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a very good point, Alex, because I think you're right. If you go for a sort of purely educational journal, I mean, they'll take some quantitative work, but they always, you know, often they want to mix methods and they want some qualitative work to back it up. And
that's right.
And I think, you know, something we're trying to develop in this network, but as STEM practitioners, I think a lot of us, when we're starting off, are far more confident in sort of quantitative methods than qualitative methods. And I think it's a fair point from my experience that you know, this journal does, you know, if you do, you know, I mean, it's good to have some, and I think the other thing I would talk about is you want a little bit of evidence and knowledge of the literature around whatever topic, so that would be a key part. But then if you know, if you've got your research question and, you know, that research question has been addressed by quantitative methods, I think that would be fine for the journal, and without doing a whole load of extra complementary qualitative research to back it up. You know, if you were going to a purely educational journal, I think you're right. Often they'd say, well, you know, we'd like you to do that qualitative research as well, type thing, or whatever.
I'm just having a look see what other questions were asked.
Yeah. Sorry, let's see if there's anything.
Yeah, so I've asked Martin's question about peer review. Yes, David, happy to share the slides, no problem at all.
So just following on from point, because obviously, you know, one aspect where STEM practitioners are perhaps less confident of, and, you know, but are starting to work, is that in the qualitative research methods, or, you know, so more qualitative techniques. I just wondered, when you talked about people making conclusions that the data isn't backed up, was that more from, you know, the qualitative comments and qualitative analysis, or was it from the more quantitative work?
Yes, it was absolutely the more qualitative, and I think it's a lot easier. I think it's a lot, you know, it's quite easy to do that, you know, when you have qualitative data to, I guess make assumptions, but I think it still needs to be backed up with, you know, backed up with fact, perhaps what other people have published, if there's work that's been published similar, perhaps not in, you know, in that particular subject, but, you know, even perhaps another subject.
Yeah. Sue.
Try that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry. Brilliant. Excellent. I was going to say the other thing about qualitative data as well is often if you've got something you've done that has qualitative results, then some journals might consider that as being a case study rather than an area of research. I think it very much depends on you might want to look for a journal that would accept a case study, because often, I mean, I tend to have creative results when, you know, I've tried something, you know, I've had initiative that I've tried with a student, with a body of students, and I've seen how it's improved or whether they've liked it, and that's where my qualitative results have appeared from, and then that's a case study, and I think that's a really valid form of research, and that is absolutely as important as some of the educational researches, which are very wordy, shall we say. But yeah, what I think what I'm trying to say is, I think every piece of research has their own journal. Not every journal will accept every piece of research. So I think what you need to do is you need to make sure that what you're writing and what you've researched is written in a way and is the same sort of research that is accepted by that journal, and there will be a journal for everything.
Yeah. I think that's really useful, Sue, because I think actually case studies might be a good starting point for STEM practitioners. You're perhaps less reliant on, aligning it with a particular theoretical framework and, having very detailed, coding analysis on how you did all that. Whereas you said, if you badge it as a case study and, you're using the qualitative comments that students make to illustrate some of your views or your interpretation, I think that works better, doesn't it?
I mean, that's where the community directions, that's where that comes into it. So, it might be a case study that somebody wants to publish, and we would generally publish it in the community directions.
Yeah, I must be, I was making that connection myself. If you've got that sort of case study, that may be something that you would go under community directions rather than, and I think for STEM practitioners, the first foray into using qualitative, that might be a useful way of starting rather than the full-blown, this is a qualitative research methods paper and I've done this, or so forth. So that's useful. Isabel.
Yeah, thanks. Just to clear something. So at the beginning, Sweta said that if you don't have natural sciences, it would be okay also to submit something that is science. So I work in microbiology. Would that be one of the?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah? I mean, it's this is about sharing good practice, and how can we all help each other in the community. So yeah, we absolutely we will accept a broad range of subjects.
I mean, I noticed that one of the papers that came up on the screen that Sweta shared with us was a publication from some biochemists and biologists in Kingston University, and that was very much within that discipline, not looking at natural sciences to a degree, but and I think quite a lot of papers in the past that have been published in that journal are from that sort of life sciences area. One thing I just follow on from that, Sweta, which we are a STEM area. Would that span the whole STEM, so engineering as well?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, we have had recently we've had some engineering colleagues that have submitted articles as well.
Yeah. Can I ask also some other questions, please?
Yeah,
so this the report of preliminary findings, I found that very interesting. So what are you expecting here? A very short article?
Yeah, I mean, it's as long as you want it. So it really depends on how much. If you've got some preliminary data, then if you would like to publish that, yeah, absolutely. Even if it's a couple of pages, then
okay, yes. Yeah. Thank you.
I think somebody had the hand up.
Any other questions?
Robert, yes, computer science too. Yes, Martin's question: what is the acceptance rate? So, really, as I said, we want to try and support colleagues to publish. So, we will accept most articles, if even if it requires a few iterations of revision. There's only been, in my time, there's probably only been, I guess, about 10% of articles where we've said, actually, this is absolutely not ready for publication, and we couldn't accept it as it was. It would need a complete rewrite rather than just revisions. Yeah. So in that instance, the authors would some of them have chosen to rewrite, some of them have chosen to go somewhere else and submit that article, but we've essentially said that it's not suitable, that it needs reworking completely.
Yeah. Alex.
I guess it's in a slightly similar vein to acceptance rate, but in terms of review, are you ever looking for reviewers?
We are. We're always happy to have new reviewers, because obviously having a breadth of people with different experience, that again also helps us to publish good articles. So if you are interested, please drop me an email.
Yeah, I will do, because I think obviously I have one avenue, which is the pedagogic research side that I want published, but then on the other strategic side is in terms of promotions and actually being able to put on a CV. Not only can I publish in these journals, but I review for them is
Yeah,
quite
absolutely.
useful.
Please drop me an email and we can have a chat about that. No problem.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alex. What's your subject background? Sorry.
So I'm an evolutionary anthropologist, but I'm teaching and program director for forensic anthropology, which is slightly different, but basically teach all the human osteology and the anatomy. So very much in the science side, rather than with a lot of stats. Yeah, that's pretty much.
And I think you highlight a point, because again, one of the aims of the network is to help staff develop and broaden their scope. And I think as you said, reviewing is a good example of that. And also, I think if you are reviewing, you learn from it yourself. Actually,
yes, absolutely.
once you've critiqued some of those papers, you always can draw on that when you're writing your own later on, sort of thing.
I think so. Yeah, because it's a lot of the stuff I research is coming out of a master's, so it is going in bigger pedagogic journals. But then there's all these things, these little things you do in the classroom, or these things you try out, and I'm less good at seeing actually where could that go, and that is useful for the people. And I think that's why things like this are really useful.
Yeah, and that's something we are looking at the moment. How do we do that? So I'm a chemist, and a bunch of myself and a bunch of colleagues from different institutions, we were talking about how sort of good practicals, where can we just find a sort of a resource for good practicals, but still thinking about why, from a pedagogical aspect, why is this experiment good, what does it teach students in terms of perhaps skills and things. So that is something that I'm having a chat with Sarah and Derek about at the moment. Can we use this journal to do that? We have, for us chemists, we have Journal of Chemical Education, we have CERP, which comes from ROC, but in terms of just having a resource, right, these are just a really good bunch of experiments, and this is the reason why there isn't really that at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, that's good. I think because that would be a useful resource, and I think, within chemistry, I think the Journal of Chemical Education, some of those publications are, quite an extensive report on how they develop practical, and you can almost use that practical yourself. But they're quite substantial. Often they're quite substantial pieces of work. Something a little bit, a bit shorter than what they expect.
Yeah, absolutely. JChem Ed is, it's my personal opinion. They're quite easy to follow. CERT perhaps is not. Some of their articles are quite difficult to follow, the terminology that's used.
Yeah.
But this is not just about chemistry as a subject. This would be for everybody. But yeah, so
I think that's a good point, because I think people won't know, but I think SERP would be a good example where they're expecting a sort of high degree of pedagogic research methods, so clear research questions, theoretical frameworks, and all the papers are framed in that, isn't it? So I think we're aiming for something a little bit more accessible to staff that are, you really draw on their day-to-day practice. So
yeah, absolutely. And also it, as I keep saying, it's about supporting colleagues. So if you're a new education practitioner, actually being able to publish and having that on your CV, using that for, say, promotion, etc., I think is, we need to encourage that, and we need to support that as much as we can.
Are there any other questions? If not, we often do use these sessions for people to raise any pressing issues that they'd like to get some feedback on. So is there anything else anybody would like to raise or ask about?
I'm going to put my email address in the chat, so if anyone would like to email me. God, my eyesight's terrible.
Okay, so if nothing else, I'd like to again thank Sweta for spending some time explaining, the role of the Scientific Natural Sciences Journal and how it's accessible to all our network. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.